Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today we are going to continue with the lecture from chapter 3. Last time we looked at the visual reception aspect of the driver. We are looking at different components of highway and we were looking at the characteristics of drivers. And within driver and for drivers we said visual reception is the most important one because they receive 90% of the information through visual reception. So we discussed different aspects of visual reception, including acuity and glare recovery and depth perception, peripheral vision, and so on and so forth. Today we are going to start with the perception reaction process. So once you look at something, your mind starts to process it. Okay, like what are you looking at and what should you do about that thing. Okay, so that is the whole perception reaction process. Until you decide what to do and then you start to act upon it, this whole thing is known as perception reaction process. So from the time you look at something till the time you start to implement your decision about that thing is known as perception reaction process. The perception reaction process comprises of 4 stages. Perception meaning you see or hear something. Okay, for example, a dog which is coming onto the road or any other animal, cat or something. So you see that something is coming towards the road, you detect there is a situation, I should do something about it. Then the second stage is identification. Okay, identify the situation meaning gather more information about the situation, try to analyze what you should do about the situation. Okay, and like try to get more information. Okay, for example, if it is an animal who is coming onto the road, how far is it from the road, how big is the animal, is he walking or is it running or what. Okay, so you identify the situation. Okay, and what is your position with respect to that animal or something. Then emotion means the thinking process to do something. So if this is the case with the animal, what you should do about that. So you start to think what should be your action. So emotion is thinking about your action. And then reaction is in response to that equation, you start to implement your action. So whatever you decided in step 3, then you start to implement it in step 4. Okay, so if your decision was to stop, then pushing the brake is your reaction. If your decision was to swerve or change the lane, then moving the steering wheel is your reaction. Okay, so these are the 4 stages. They have given the example in terms of a dog. Let me give you another example. For example, you see a car is stopped in front of you. This is perception. Then you identify how far is the car, how much is your speed, is the car completely stopped or is it moving slowly. Okay, and then or what is the how much space you have around the car and so on. Then emotion is deciding what to do. Should I change my lane, should I slow down, should I stop. And then reaction is to do your action. Okay, so you decided that you should change your lane, so changing this moving the steering wheel is a reaction. Okay, so perception reaction process is important to be understood for design of signals and finding out of braking distances. Okay, and we will do some examples in which you will see why braking distance is important. Okay, just one clarification here. Reaction is your action to the situation. Okay, it does not include the time taken by the reaction by the vehicle after you have taken the action. It does not take into account the time taken by the vehicle after you have taken your action. So, for example, you are going at 80 kilometers per hour. You put your foot on the brake. That is your reaction. So putting your foot on the brake was your reaction. After putting your foot on the brake at 80 kilometers per hour, the car will not stop suddenly. It will take some time. So that time is not included in reaction. So that time is not part of perception reaction process. The perception reaction process ends when you put your foot on the brake. Similarly, when you start to move your steering wheel to change the lane, moving the steering wheel is part of the reaction. Then how much time the vehicle will take to go into the other lane, that is not part of perception reaction process. Okay. So initiation of the action is part of the process. When the action is completed, that depends upon the speed of the vehicle, the characteristics of the vehicle, and so on. Okay, so that is not part of perception reaction process. Okay, perception reaction process, or the time taken to complete the perception reaction process, depends upon many things. Okay, for example, and we will use these things later on. Okay, so it's good that you should know about these. So first of all, situation complexity. If the situation is more complicated, you need more time. Complicated is a situation where you are looking at more than one thing and you may have to consider more than one action. That is a complicated situation. What is an easy situation? You see there's a signal and the signal is red. You stop. Easy. What is a complicated situation? A pedestrian who is in the middle of the road. That is a complicated situation, especially in a high traffic condition. If the traffic volume is high, then it's very complicated. Should you save yourself from accidents? Should you save the pedestrian? Okay, can you do both? And how can you do both? Okay, so there are many things you can consider. So that makes a situation complicated. Okay, so where there is more than one thing you have to consider: vehicles, pedestrians, signs, symbols, signals, and then your own action can be more than one thing. Okay, so you slow down, then you change your lane. That's a complicated action. Okay, instead of just stopping. So situation complexity. So if you are in a complicated situation, you need more time to think and you need more time to implement your decision as well. So stopping at a signal will take less time as compared to saving yourself and other drivers in a high volume, high traffic volume condition. Environmental conditions. Okay, people usually get tired or stressed out when the conditions are not good. Environmental conditions are not good. Okay, like if the light is not sufficient, if there is rainfall, sometimes just people get panicked if the rainfall is heavy. Okay, just because of the amount of rain you are getting, so people get panicked. So in those cases, you need more time. Age, your perception reaction process starts to take more time with the passage of as you get older. Okay, obviously you are gaining experience, so you are saving yourself from one end, but you are also losing your the ability of your mind to process things fast. So you see the sportsmen, they have a very short career. You know, like usually they you will see them get retired in 30s and 40s. Even 40 is a 40 is very considered very old in case of sportsmen. Okay, so if you get to 40, that you are considered very old in case of sports, because you are losing your ability for fast action. Okay, they call it reflex action in sports terminology. They call it reflex action. It's the same thing, perception reaction process. So you are getting slower, okay, with the passage of time. Fatigue means your physical condition, tiredness, stress. Okay, these things also slow down your perception reaction process. If you are tired, it will take more time. Expectancy of the situation. Reacting to an expected situation is easier and you take less time. Reacting to an unexpected situation takes more time. So you are, when you are going in front of or you are going from a residential street, you are expecting pedestrians to cross, you are expecting kids on the road. So even if somebody comes in front of you, it will be easier for you. I will not say that it's completely easy. It will be easier for you to react to that situation. But if you are going on, let's say Sheikh Khalifa bin Salman highway at 100 kilometers per hour, there are barriers on the side of the road and you find someone in the middle of the road, this is completely unexpected. You will take more time to think. That's why they put, you know, these warning signs when they are doing some construction work on the road. Because, you know, if you are coming to that road for the first time, then you are not expecting half of the road to be blocked. So they put these warning signs to make the unexpected situation expected for you. Okay. Normally, perception reaction time is taken as 2.5 seconds. Okay. And again, this is according to AASHTO, and they are saying this is enough for 90% of the drivers. So 2.5 seconds according to AASHTO is the 90th percentile. I think I defined the percentile in the previous lecture as well. So it covers 90% of the drivers. So this becomes the 90th percentile for the driver population. Now you see here, short form is written PIEV. So I showed you this. P, perception, I, identification, E, emotion, and then why we have V, why not R? Because they are using volition. The last term with V means volition. Okay, so for some reason they don't want to use a reaction here. So either they call it perception reaction time, PRT, or they call it PIEV time, which is perception, identification, emotion, and volition. Okay, VOLITION, volition time. Okay, perception, reaction, emotion, volition time. So volition means reaction. Okay. So other things they are not that well documented, but people have done some research about the reaction time to expected and unexpected situation, because it's very easy to do. So they have found that the perception reaction time may increase up to 35% in unexpected situations compared to expected situation. Okay, so driving on the road on which you go on daily basis, and there's no problem, there's nothing new on the road. You may take like 1 second to react to something, and if you are going on the same road, but now there's a new lane on this road which was not there earlier, so to react to that change, you will take like 1.35 seconds. So 0.35 seconds extra will be taken by you to react to the situation, unexpected situation. Or 35%, 0.35, because I was talking about 1 second. Okay, so let us see how this can help us. Perception reaction time, PRT, perception reaction time. So a driver has a perception reaction time of 2.5 seconds. So we are taking the standard perception reaction time of AASHTO. This driver is driving at 105 kilometers per hour, and he sees a hazard on the road. Okay, sorry, this should be 105. Let me change it, because I changed the units. So that's 105 kilometer per hour. Okay, so they are saying that the driver will keep on moving at 105 kilometer per hour until he decides and implements his decision. So for this hazard, if he decides to stop, or like in the question they are saying that he will decide to brake, so until he puts his foot on the brake, is like he puts his foot on the brake as a result of looking at that hazard. Okay, so until he does that, his speed is 105 kilometers per hour. So his speed doesn't change. So this is another thing which we assume about perception reaction time. This is another thing which we assume about perception reaction time, that during perception reaction time, obviously when you put your foot on the brake, that is the end of your perception reaction process. Remember, I told you this is the end of your perception reaction process. So obviously when you put your foot on the brake, your speed will reduce, but this is not part of your perception reaction process. So if you want to calculate the distance covered during perception reaction process, we always assume that the speed will remain constant. During perception reaction process, the speed remains constant. Okay, so during perception reaction time, the speed doesn't change. So what they are asking us to calculate is how much distance will be covered during perception reaction time. Okay, So at the end of perception reaction time, what will happen? The driver will activate the brake, meaning he will put his foot on the brake, or if he has some other type of vehicle, he may engage in braking using his hand or something. Okay. Now we have latest vehicles in which brakes are activated by hand or even automatically as well. So before the brakes are activated in any other way, how much distance the driver will cover from the time when he sees a hazard on the road till the time the brake is activated, how much distance he will cover, and how much time he is taking, 2.5 seconds during this period. Okay, so in 2.5 seconds, what distance he will cover. So this is a very simple problem. Okay, the only thing you have to do is convert the units. Why we want to convert the units? Because the speed is given in kilometers per hour. You can see the perception reaction time is in seconds, and the distance which he will cover during this time will not be in kilometers, so it will be in meters. So that's why we need to convert the units. So we'll convert the units of speed from kilometer per hour to meter per second. Okay, why we are converting the unit for speed? Because we know we want the distance in meters, so it makes sense that you change the units of speed, and we will always do that. Keep it in mind. In all the remaining questions, you will see that we are always changing the units of the speed. Okay, from kilometers per hour to meter per second. Okay, so kilometer per hour, 1 kilometer has 1000 meters, 1 hour has 3600 seconds. So kilometer per hour to meter per second will be multiplied by this ratio. So this ratio comes out to be 0.278. So instead of using this ratio again and again, we will just remember this 0.278. Okay, so 0.278 is the conversion from kilometers per hour to meter per second. Okay, just keep it in mind. So in the next question, when we are using this conversion, I will directly put 0.278. Okay, so it will be 29.2 meter per second. Okay, and distance covered in 2.5 seconds will be distance equals speed into time. Speed is v, t is time, t is 2.5 seconds, speed is 29.2. So you multiply them. He will cover 72.9 meters distance before he will activate the brake. Okay, so he has looked at something which requires him to brake, and before he decides and puts his foot on the brake, he has already covered approximately 73 meters. Okay. Now, so this was about driver characteristics, but we have to keep one thing in mind, that old drivers have a problem with their abilities, especially the drivers who cross 60 years range. So that's why in most of the countries, I think including Bahrain, 60 years is considered as a retirement age. Okay, so we have we have significant number of people who are driving on the roads and who are above 60. Okay, alhamdulillah, in Bahrain this population is less because the population of young people is more. Okay, we are not saying that the population of old people is less than any other country. No, young people are more, so their percentage is less. The old people percentage is less. But if you go to European countries, USA and China and these countries, they are after they have implemented this population control strategies, the percentage of old people in their population is higher. Okay, in some countries it is more than the young people. Okay, so but even in our case, we cannot neglect them. They are still in significant proportion, people who are above 60. Now, what are the factors that we need to take into account for old drivers? First of all, they are more dependent upon vehicles than young drivers. Because as a young person, you can walk longer, you can use bicycles. It will be easier for you to use buses as well. Okay, even if they are not comfortable, or even if you have to wait for a long time, or if you have to take longer journeys, you can still afford it. You can still absorb the difficulties of the trip. So old people, obviously, they are in more need of their vehicles. First of all, because they cannot walk long, they cannot bicycle for, they cannot use a bike for longer periods. Okay, and they are much safer in the vehicles as well, as compared to walking or cycling or buses. They are safer and they will be more comfortable. So they are more dependent upon vehicles, okay, as compared to young people. But their abilities are declined as compared to young people. Which abilities? Their ability to see the details of the object. Okay, find details about the object. So there are some minor faults on the road. So there's some minor objects on the road. They may neglect it. They may ignore it. They have problem of night vision. So young people are able to see more clearly, even when the lighting condition is not good. They have reduced flexibility and motion range. Okay, so how fast they can move and how fast their hands and legs can move and how fast they can shift their line of sight. Okay, so these actions are slightly reduced for them. They have narrower visual fields. I talked about when we were talking about dynamic acuity. So I told you we have peripheral vision, we have clear vision, we have fairly clear vision. So I gave you the range for each one, right? So for clear vision, we had a range of 3 to 5. Then for fair clear, we had a range of 10 to 12. Then for peripheral vision, we had a range of 160 to 180. So these ranges are lower for old people and they are higher for young people. So young people may be able to see, may have peripheral vision up to 180 degrees. Old people have less, and so on. They are more sensitive to glare. So like I told you in the previous class, glare is when you come from extreme darkness to light or from extreme light to darkness. So more sensitivity to glare means that they take more time to recover in these conditions, and their visual ability is more declined when they are in the adjustment phase. Okay, so their glare vision is less and they take more adjustment time to adjust to the change in light. They have higher reaction time and they have reduced muscle strength. So if they have to push the brakes hard or they have to control their steering wheel, their strength is obviously less than a young person. Okay, but still that's why we were talking about designing for people who have below normal abilities. So to accommodate these drivers who have declined in their abilities. Okay, now let us talk about pedestrians. Pedestrians are the same as drivers in most of the cases, but pedestrians need to cross the roads and we need to provide them some special facilities to cross the road safely. So you can provide them a crosswalk, you can provide them a signal, you can see a signal here, you can provide them a pedestrian bridge. Okay, so this is a special type of pedestrian bridge you see here. They call it Hooven Ring bridge. But we have normal bridges in Bahrain as well for pedestrians. Okay, so the pedestrian control devices, so we call all these things as pedestrian control devices. The devices or facilities which are used or which are provided for pedestrians to cross the road safely. So as I was saying, pedestrian characteristics are similar to drivers. But when you are providing signals for pedestrians, or when the pedestrians are crossing from traffic lights, then you need to make sure that pedestrians can easily cross from one end of the road to the other end of the during the red phase. Obviously when the light is red for the vehicles, they are supposed to be crossing during that time. So to estimate how much time they need to cross, you need to know their speed. Okay, so pedestrians who are from different age groups and who belong to different categories, they have different needs and they have different speeds. Okay, so normal walking speed is from 0.9 meter per second to 2.4 meter per second. A typical design value is 1.22 meter per second. So again, we are designing close to the slower speed, because a faster pedestrian can easily cross. A slower pedestrian is the one we should be taking care of. So even in normal conditions, we are taking the design speed to be 1.22 meter per second. So when you estimate how much time they need to cross, you use this speed. If you feel that the location has more elderly pedestrians, then you can even design for the minimum speed, which is 0.9 meter per second. Okay, these figures which you see here, they are giving you the dimensions of the crosswalk and dimension for the ramp which you have to provide for the pedestrians. Okay, so you can have a look. These are just the numbers. Okay, there's nothing, no explanation here. Then we have pedestrians who are handicapped. Okay, so for handicapped pedestrians, for example, blind or pedestrians who are on a wheelchair, then you have to give them some special considerations as well. So we provide them accessible pedestrian signals, APS. Okay, so accessible means that it is accessible to everybody. So you see, if there's a pedestrian signal, you would see a button which the pedestrian can push to cross the road. So after they push the button, the signal will turn green for after some time. So that button should be accessible even to people who are on a wheelchair or people who are blind. They should be able to feel or reach out to the button. And when the signal turns green for the pedestrian, it should give them some other signal. So even if they cannot see the green signal, they can hear something else. Okay, so in European countries or in other countries or even in Bahrain, when the signal turns green for the pedestrians, I'm talking about the pedestrian signals, okay, pedestrian signals, because in European countries, all signals have sound as well. But in Bahrain, I have only seen this arrangement with the pedestrian signals. Normal traffic lights do not have this sound. Okay, so if you go to European countries, all signals on which pedestrians are allowed to cross, they have a ringing sound as well. So when the signal is green for you, there's a different sound. So you know there's time for you to cross, even if you cannot see the green. Okay, then the surfaces which they use at the crosswalk or the point where the pedestrians are supposed to stop, these surfaces are tactile surfaces. So they are different from the surface of the road, the normal surface of the road. So that if you are a blind person and you are feeling the surface with your stick, so you can, when you are on the asphalt, you will hear a different sound, and when you are on the pavement or when you are on the crosswalk, you will hear a different sound. So you know that whether you are on the crosswalk or you are diverting from the crosswalk. Okay, even in Bahrain, I'm not talking about the pedestrians now. When you come close to major intersections, the signals which are near the major intersections, the surface is made up of bricks. So even if you are not paying attention to the road, when you come close to a signal, you will feel that you are not on asphalt. So you will start to pay attention. Okay, so it's something similar. Dropped curb, you can see the dropped curb here in this picture. So this is the curb. Okay, these blocks are known as a curb. The blocks which are made for making this traffic island or median, they are known as the curbs. So you can see where they are allowing you to cross, the blocks are dropped, right? So you don't have to go up and down. This is what we call as a dropped curb. Okay, so you don't have to go up or down the curb or up or down the island or the median in order to cross. Okay, so this is again a consideration for the wheelchair, and again you will provide ramps here as well wherever there is going up or down. Wherever you cannot drop the curb, for example on the sidewalk, if you cannot drop the curb, then provide a ramp. You can see the ramp here on the sidewalk. Okay, so you need to provide all these things. In case of pedestrians with disabilities, you can assume a lower crossing speed as low as 0.6 meter per second. So remember, for normal pedestrians the minimum was 0.9, but for disabled pedestrians, if you are designing for disabled pedestrians, you can design for as low as 0.6 meter per second. There's a manual which is called as Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, MUTCD, Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So this manual contains all the standards about pedestrian signals and crossings and so on. Okay, so it's available online, free. You can download it if you are interested in finding out more details about pedestrian crossings. Okay, then like we said, in urban areas, bicycles are also part of the highway system. So for bicyclists are like drivers, and they are driving their vehicle. Their vehicle is a bicycle. So everything we discussed about perception, reaction, and visual acuity is similar to, can be applied to bicyclists as well, because obviously bicyclists are normally the same people who are drivers as well, like in terms of physical abilities. Pedestrians can be disabled, blind, or whatever, but bicyclists are more close to drivers. Okay, so AASHTO has divided the bicyclists into three classes. Okay, I keep on saying AASHTO, AASHTO, AASHTO. Some of you may be wondering, or some of you may have heard this word in some other course, but they don't remember. So AASHTO means American Association of State Highway and Transport Officials. American Association of State Highway and Transport Officials. Okay, so this is also an American organization, but its standards are adopted worldwide, including GCC countries as well. If you ask anyone about the highway standards for GCC countries, they will tell you that we have adopted from AASHTO, which basically means that we have taken the standards by doing some, conversions. Okay, I have a report which says that. So coming back, AASHTO has divided the bicyclists into three classes: class A, B, C. Class A is people who are experienced, who are skilled, who are advanced, who are fit. Okay, they have good control of their bicycles, they have stamina, they have fitness, and they can ride comfortably along the vehicles. Alongside the vehicle, they can comfortably ride. But keep in mind, no type of bicyclist is allowed on a major highway, which they are calling as freeway. So freeway means a high speed road. No type of bicyclist is allowed on a freeway. Okay, so we are talking about class A. So if you cannot allow class A, so obviously you cannot allow the other classes as well. Class A is the best one. Okay, so class A are people who regularly ride on bicycles, maybe for going to their work or maybe their educational areas and so on and so forth, and they are physically fit as well. Then we have class B, people who are less experienced, so they may be riding their bicycles for exercise and recreation. So they may be bicycling or cycling for maybe 1 hour or 2 hours a week. So they are less experienced and they are less used to riding the bicycle with the traffic. So we can allow them on residential streets, and if you have a bike facility, for example, a park or a bike lane, like if you go to Sakhir, the Lak area, you will see that they have made bicycle lanes beside the road. So bicycle facilities and residential facilities can consider bicycle riders of class B for their design. And then we have class C, which is children, okay, which are normally under supervision of their parents. So these are kids, and obviously they are not well experienced, they cannot deal with traffic, and they cannot they cannot be allowed with on major roads or on any high speed roads. So they are basically kids which are on the street, residential street, just for fun and play. Okay, and normally they are with their parents. So bicycle facilities or any facility on which you are allowing bicycle is should be designed for class B or C, or class B and C. Okay, class B and C should be able to use the bicycle facilities. The speed of the bicycle riders varies from 20 miles per hour to 8 miles per hour depending upon the gradient. So obviously you are faster on downgrade, and you are slower on upgrade. Okay. Normally the bicycle facilities in Bahrain are 1.5 meter wide. Okay, sorry, I forgot to convert the speeds here, but just multiply this with 1.61, you will get the speed in kilometers per hour. Okay, so 20 or whatever speed you want to convert, just multiply it with 1.6, you will get the speed in kilometers per hour. So the speed is 20 miles per hour on level and 31 on downgrade and 8 on upgrade. okay, which is understandable. Obviously, going up, so you need more force and you will be slower and so on. Now let us talk about vehicle characteristics. So vehicle characteristics can be divided into three types: static, dynamic, and kinematic. Static characteristics are size and weight. Dynamic characteristics are those which cause the motion of the vehicle, and kinematic characteristics are those forces which are involved in the motion of the vehicle without considering the forces which are causing the motion. Okay, without considering the forces which are causing the motion. So I will explain the difference later on in more detail. But dynamic forces are external forces. Let me put it this way, and kinematic forces are internal forces. Okay, simple. Kinematic forces are those forces which are acting or which are produced within the vehicle itself, and dynamic forces are those forces which are produced or which are acting on the vehicle from the outside environment. Okay. So static characteristics are size and weight. So size of the vehicle affects the lane width and the size of the parking bays or the parking spaces, and it also affects how much vertical clearance is required for the vehicle. So when you are going under the bridge, you will see on the bottom of the bridge they will write the height of the vehicle which is allowed to go under the bridge. Or if you are going inside a parking area, they will put an overhead barrier, an overhead iron rod to specify the vertical clearance of the or the height of the vehicle that is allowed inside the parking area. Okay, so this is called as vertical clearance. And then we have so obviously vertical clearance depends upon the size of the vehicle. Then we have the weight. Weight normally affects the pavement design of the road. Okay, and I think I discussed it earlier as well. There are different parts of design: geometric design, pavement design, and structural design. We discussed it in chapter 1. So pavement design is the one in which you are designing the surface and the material below the surface of the road. So obviously this depends upon the weight. How much weight the pavement is going to carry, and that weight is coming from where? From the vehicle. So weight of the vehicle affects the design of the pavement. Weight of the vehicle affects the design of the bridge. Obviously, if you are designing a bridge, then the structural design of the bridge, design of beams, columns, and footings of the bridge will depend upon the weight of the vehicle. And axle load. Okay, what is an axle? So you have a vehicle and you have the tires on both sides of the vehicle, right? Let me show you. So this is one tire, this is another tire. Let's say this is a car, so we have 4 tires, right? Okay, we have 4 tires. So this is a car. Okay, and it has 4 tires. This is the left hand side, this is the right hand side. Okay, and normally there is a rod which is connecting the tires on the left hand and the right hand side. So that rod is known as an axle. Okay, the rod which is connecting the tires on the left hand side of the vehicle and the right hand side of the vehicle. So these are the tires which are in the same alignment, right? The tires which are in the same alignment, in the same line, and there's a rod connecting them, and that rod is known as an axle. Okay, so the weight which is coming on the from the vehicle is coming to the axle. Okay, normally for cars there is no problem with the axle load. Okay, because the axles are very close to each other and there are only 2 axles, front axle and the rear axle, and the load is more evenly distributed for the car. But for a truck or for buses, the load is not evenly distributed. Usually the front part has less load and the rear part has more load. So sometimes maybe the total load is fine, but the load on one axle is too much, so that axle can break. Okay, so the total load on the vehicle is, let's say, 40 ton or 100 tons, which is fine if it was evenly distributed. But because on heavy vehicles the load is more distributed towards the rear side, sometimes the total load is fine, but the load on one axle is higher than it should be. One axle, each axle has its own capacity. So when you are providing design standards for the vehicles, you provide them on the basis of axle load. How much load should be put on one axle? Okay, so that, because even if one axle breaks, then the whole vehicle is done, right? It's finished. The whole vehicle will be on the road. Okay, so and these types of accidents are very common in Pakistan. You know, you can search on Google and you will find axle braking in Pakistan, and you will find some images where the truck is broken into two parts, two halves, because the axle has broken down. Okay, so you can imagine what will happen if this road is broken. Then obviously the road will uh, divide the vehicle into halves. Okay, so the axle load is designed according to the weight of the vehicle, and then the gradient. This is related to something which we will do in this course. So the maximum gradient is taken according to the weight of the vehicle. Because what will happen again, there's a problem with heavy vehicles when they are going up with the gradient. When they are going up the gradient, they slow down, or they slow down because of their weight. They slow down, and if they are slowed, then they slow down everybody else as well. So you need to take into account the gradient, which will allow even the heaviest vehicle to move at some speed. Okay, so a gradient of 15% maybe, or a gradient of 5 degrees may be good for a passenger car, but this gradient is not good enough for a heavy truck. And if it is not good for truck, then anybody who is behind that truck will suffer as well. So gradients are chosen according to the weight of the vehicle, keeping in mind that the heaviest vehicle can still go at some speed. Okay, the allowable sizes and weights for vehicles in Bahrain are these. So these are the static characteristics standards for Bahrain. Okay, so any weight which is above this range is considered as abnormal load. Okay, and I will show you the equation to calculate the load on each axle as well, but this is for the total load. This is for a total load. Okay, so when you are designing a road, you have to select a design vehicle. Okay, and you have to select a vehicle that will represent nearly all the vehicles which will use that road, because each vehicle has its own size and weight. Okay, so you cannot say, okay, I will design for any vehicle. If you are designing for a car, that pavement and that road will not be suitable for a truck. So if you design for a truck, then obviously it's suitable for car as well. So you have to design for the heaviest and the largest vehicle which is expected to use the road. Okay, keep this in mind. So the standards which I am showing you here on this slide are the maximum standards. You may not design for them. You may design for a lower standard or for a lower size of vehicle, because that vehicle is expected to use the road. So if you are designing a street, okay, and there on that street the heaviest truck is not expected to come, so don't design the street for the heaviest truck. So don't take these dimensions where they are not required. Find out what actual size of vehicle is expected to come on the road and design according to that. So these are the maximum. Above this, they will not allow any vehicle in Bahrain, in the whole Bahrain. But for a specific road, you may have a vehicle which has a lower weight and a lesser dimension than these. Okay. So for calculating the axle load, allowable axle load on one axle, they use this formula which is known as the bridge formula. I've just looked at the time. We will not be able to finish the example, so let me keep this for tomorrow. Okay, so tomorrow we will finish we'll look at the formula and the example. Okay, any questions? Any questions before I move to the attendance? Any questions? Okay, so Anas Abdul Hamid. Anas Abdul Hamid, raise your hand or use the mic. Anas Abdul Hamid. Ammar Abdullah. Ammar Abdullah. Okay. Yusuf Abdullah. Yusuf Abdullah.
Yes, Herr Doctor.
Okay. Why there are two Yusuf Abdullah? There's another Yusuf Abdullah.
I don't know, Doctor.
Mahmoud Adil. Mahmoud Adil.
Yes, Doctor.
Okay. Aya Ahmed.
محمود عادل جمعة دكتور.
What?
محمود عادل جمعة.
It's written Mahmoud Adil. I think there's only one Mahmoud Adil. Don't worry. Aya Ahmed.
Okay.
Okay. Yusuf Ahmed.
Yes, doctor.
Iman Al-Gharbal. Okay. Zainab Ali. Zainab Ali. Okay. Dalal Al-Mahmoud. Dalal Al-Mahmoud. Okay. Hashim Al-Sada. Hashim Al-Sada. Okay. Abdul Rahman Bassam. Abdul Rahman Bassam. Okay. Sozan Bukhari. Okay. Sara Fadil. Okay. Maria Fauzi. Maria Fauzi. Okay. Mariam Hassan. Mariam Hassan. Okay. Haneen Hamad. Haneen Hamad.
Yes, I'm here, doctor.
Okay. Noor Hassan. Okay. Ola Hassan. Raneem Hassan. Batul Hussain. Hussain. Maria Khalifa. Saleh Mahdi. Abdullah Muhammad. Abdullah Muhammad. Abdullah Muhammad. Ahmad. Ahmad Muhammad.
Yes, doctor.
And there's another Ahmad Muhammad. I think this one is Ahmad Muhammad Hadi or Mahdi. Mahab Muhammad. Mahab Muhammad.
Yes, doctor.
Sara Muhammad. Okay. Iman. Iman Muhammad Hussain. Iman Muhammad Hussain. Muhammad Musa. Muhammad Musa. Salma Mubarak. Salma Mubarak. Okay.
Yes, doctor.
Ahmad Qasim. Okay.
Yes, doctor.
Abir Raghib. Abir Raghib. Abir Raghib.
Yes, doctor.
Faisal Salah.
Yes, doctor.
Maryam Sayyid Abdullah. Sorry, Maram Sayyid Abdullah. Maram Sayyid Abdullah.
Yes, doctor.
Amira
Doctor, can we
Saeed.
leave now?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Mira Sayyid Saeed. Okay. Batul Majid. Batul S. Majid. Okay. Bayan. Bayan Yusuf. Okay. Zan Yusuf. Zan Yusuf.
Yes.
Zan.
Yes, doctor.
Okay. Okay. Iman Muhammad Hussain. Abdullah Muhammad.
Yes, doctor. Yes.
Abdullah Muhammad. Okay. Anas Abdul Hamid. Anas Abdul Hamid. Okay, anyone from the other section? Anyone from section 2? Anyone from section 2? Okay, I'll see you guys tomorrow, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.